What's your take on this? Because as Sam was just outlining there, Gorgieva says with a comprehensive package of pro-market reforms, China could add 20% or $3.5 trillion to its economy over the next 15 years. What would you say are the biggest hurdles to achieving this higher quality growth that Chinese policymakers talk about and implementing some of these reforms? Is it ideological or are there other factors at play?
Well, there's a lot of factors at play, but I would point out one thing that Sam also talked about, which is that the consumer side of the economy is negatively impacted by the real estate crisis. And so I would simply tell investors that China is at a similar point in its development, a similar fork in the road, to use the theme of the day, as the US and Western economies were in 2010 and 11. They're basically mirrored in a secular stagnation. And unfortunately, unless the government engages in pretty aggressive fiscal stimulus that buoys the household appetite and animal spirits and also helps accelerate this deleveraging that they're in, it's difficult to see how any reforms are really going to add GDP growth over the next 5 years. They have to accelerate the deleveraging process.
Marko, we know these reforms need to take place. Is there political will in China to get them done?
I mean, right now, it's not about politics necessarily. I mean, I think right now the problem is that the government is hesitating to support the economy because of moral hazard. So you're not seeing the government really step up in terms of, fiscal outlays or increasing its budget deficit in order to offset private sector deleveraging, simply because there is a very understandable feeling that moral hazard would be a problem. But then there, of course, is also a political element where the Communist Party of China has become a lot more homogeneous. There's a lot fewer voices that are allowed to participate in the economic debates, and that's likely going to continue to create these problems of oversteering towards one policy and then trying to correct that 12 months later.
And Marko, no doubt forums like these are a bit of a fact-finding mission for both parties. CEOs are there in China to find out how serious they are about being open for business. But as you've pointed out in your notes, it's also a chance for the Chinese authorities to find out from America Inc. about the upcoming US election, which of course is the elephant in the room. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, so last year was really the first time that they had the forum since COVID, and it was an opportunity to say, China's open for business, but also to conduct some of this diplomacy via the business community. And for the Chinese, it's really about, is there an end in sight to the current policy setting in the US, which is extremely anti-Chinese? And I think, ironically, what most onshore investors and policymakers are probably hoping for, and I know this is not something that your viewers probably think is the case, but I think most Chinese onshore commentators are really hoping that Donald Trump comes back to power. And that's because, say whatever you will about his rhetoric, but at least in his previous term, he did conclude that phase one deal with China. And he has also given some hints recently on TikTok, on onshoring, where he actually might be willing to contemplate some sort of a deal with China.
Yeah, I want to talk about that because no doubt and analysts have pointed out that there are disadvantages with another Biden term in terms of the maturing of current US policy, but also maturing of the US alliance. But what about the economic rivalry that Trump perceivably started and this talk of some more 60% tariffs on Chinese goods? No doubt that wouldn't be great for China.
No, absolutely. And it would be very difficult for anyone to front run a Trump presidency by, for example, investing in Chinese assets, hoping for a deal. Initial phase is going to lead to a lot of volatility, as you pointed out. Tariffs are likely to go up on day one of the presidency. However, let's not forget that the Biden administration has not concluded a single trade deal, and they've never even given China a set of demands that China could potentially, agree to. And there's a reason for that. It's very difficult for the Democratic White House to sell any sort of a deal domestically. They'll be seen as weak on China. Whereas with Donald Trump, it goes back to that old adage only Nixon could go to China. In the case of Trump, no one's going to accuse him of being weak on China if he were to bring back a deal. And I think that a lot of onshore commentators, a lot of onshore investors that we speak to, they're sensing that there could be an opportunity. Yes, it will be very painful in the near term as Donald Trump implements those tariffs, but ultimately it will all be in the service of some, great deal, probably the greatest deal ever. I'm, of course, joking.